Here is one of a series of talks by spiritual leader Lola McDowell Lee, spanning 2 decades from the early 70s through the 90s. Lola was a Zen Roshi, whose Rinzai lineage included Dr. Henry Plutov and renowned Zen Master Shigetsu Sasaki. Lola was a religious scholar as well as an ordained Christian minister. While the talks are focused mainly on Zen and Buddhism, Lola drew on many spiritual traditions, including those of Jesus, Plato, Lao Tzu, the Hindu Vedas, Meister Eckhart, and Gurdjieff.
The student Doko came to the master and said, "In what state of mind should I seek the truth?" And the master replied, "There is no mind, so you cannot put it in any state. And there is no truth, so you cannot seek it." But then Doko says, if there's no mind and no truth, why do all these students gather before you every day to study? And the master looked around and said, I don't see anyone. And this little Doko then says, well, then who are you teaching? And the master says again, I have no tongue, so how can I teach? And this little Doko shook his head very sadly and said, I cannot follow you. I cannot understand. And the master said, I don't understand myself. Huh? Yeah. Who understands? Who amongst you understands life? Do you understand life? Well, we are wont to say life is a mystery, which we live. Life is a mystery in which we live and move and have our being. John? Yeah. When you sit for meditation, you sit down and your mind, to begin with, is full of the things that have happened during the day. Then you have them to deal with. And you deal with them for a little while, depending on how disciplined you are. And then all of a sudden, it becomes very quiet. It's kind of like a silence drops over you. And in this silence, all of a sudden, a presence has entered. How this? Do you understand? Can you describe the sudden coming and again the sudden going? It's a mystery. As Jesus said, likening the Spirit to the wind, it comes like the wind and it goes like the wind, and you can see the effect thereof, but know not whither it cometh or goeth. It's a mystery. One moment I am myself, whatever that might be, and the next moment I am what? It was St. Augustine who said, and I like this, I am aware of something in myself. It's like a light dancing before my soul. And if it could be brought out with a perfect steadiness, it would surely be life eternal. It hides, and then again it shows. It comes like a thief, as if it would steal everything away from the soul. But since it shows itself and draws attention, it must want to allure the soul and make the soul follow it, to rob the soul of self. Yeah. Too bad he got so loused up, huh? Jesus said, "Whosoever shall forsake anything for my sake shall receive again 100-fold. And whosoever will have me must deny himself of everything. And whosoever will serve me must follow me and not seek his own." Difficult, huh? I think we forget it too often. You know, this denying of myself in order to serve. You would serve him to deny yourself. We've usually got the cart before the horse. You know, we do all of our indulgences and then, oh yeah, now we better sit. See? And we sit down there nice and quiet, maybe, and we say, let the Lord serve me. This me. And yet St. Paul said, when he comes in, I must go out. We forget this. Yeah. And St. Simon the Younger said, I saw him in my house amidst all these everyday things. He appeared unexpectedly. It leaped over me without anything between, like light into glass. And I became that which I saw before and beheld from afar. I do not know how to relate this miracle to you. I am a man by nature, and God by the grace of God. We indulge ourselves. We are very indulgent with our things. Do you know, or do you even guess? Do you even surmise, or have you even ever thought about what precious things, you know, we could call them treasures, may be stored up in you, which have never, ever been described? Have you ever thought about that? These treasures, these things that are hidden in your depths. Those who indulge themselves, Meister Eckhart called them the aristocracy. This aristocracy, he said, will go only as far as their natural intelligence will take them. And they make no effort to get at the core. And so it resides, you know, at the core, this pearl or this treasure. It remains hidden and remains unknown. The old prophets, you know, they said, I will sit and be silent and listen to what God shall say in me. You know, of course, we know that he's not going to talk to you in words. You know, he hasn't got a mouth. He hasn't even learned a language. The poor guy hasn't got the time. I mean, when you think about it, you know, he goes to every courtroom every day, several times a day. They call him to be there for the witness. And he goes to committee meetings, and he goes to Congress, and he goes to all the state legislatures, and he goes to every church every Sunday. How could he ever learn a language? He simply doesn't have the time. No. But he does communicate. There is love and there is will. His force of will and his force of love, of which ours is a puny little replica, totally dependent on him, on his love. Is this not a mystery? And should we not all, as they say, hasten with all speed to this place of the meeting with the unknown? Junaid, he was a Sufi master. He lived a very ordinary life. Most people didn't know that he was an enlightened man. He worked like an ordinary laborer, and only those who had eyes could see what he was. And he would, from time to time, take on a young man to labor with him, and in this way teach him. And one time he got this young man who was all the time showing his knowledge, you know. Whatever Junaid would do, this young man would say, well, you're not doing it right. I'll show you how to do it better. And this went on over and over and over through the day. Don't do it that way. Do it this way. This is this, and this is this, and this is this. And he would talk all about it. And finally, Junaid looked at him, and he just laughed. And he says, young man, I am not so young as to know so much. Yeah. So we make an effort, some people do, to solve this problem of this mystery that we call life. And it runs around in the mind. You know, what is this? What is this? And when all our efforts are used up, then all of a sudden, this mystery just blossoms forth. It dawns, as they say, you know. And when that moment happens, when that mystery, that it really is a mystery, when that dawns on you, then all of a sudden the doors are open, and you're invited in. As a knower, like this young man working for Junaid, you don't enter. But as a child, you know, not knowing, then the mystery can embrace you. You've looked at your mind. You use it all the time, so surely you've looked at it. And you can see that it's kind of like it's two parts. This is a very poor description, maybe, but there's one part of it that is filled with appearances. All these things that we know. We know this is an envelope, and we know that it's white, and we know that it's got typing on it. We know these things. And there's the other part. It doesn't know anything about that. And it's right there. all the time. So we have this, what is called form, and what is called formless. Now this little disciple, Doko, he comes to this Roshi inquiring, in what state of mind should I seek the truth? Should the mind be positive? Should it be negative? Should it be inquiring? Should it be not inquiring? Should it be pliant? Should it be puzzled? What attitude do I take is what he's asking, huh? We have a lot of attitudes, you know. Which one am I going to use in order to seek? Which one do you use? And there comes his answer, you know, there is no mind. So how can you have a state of mind? See? So if there's no mind, what state are you talking about? It is difficult to understand. Huh? Where is the mind to be directed? Where is the attention to be directed? Wherever the mind is directed, all the rest will just follow that direction. You might remember that, huh? You can even experiment. If you put your mind in your right hand, it will be held captive in your right hand, and the rest of the body will be inconvenienced. There in India, you know, they have so many, there's not so many, but there are practices, you know, of putting the mind in certain areas. And it is true that the rest of the body shrivels if the mind is held in a place long enough, such as the right hand. So what you do is you let the mind fill the whole body. Let it be held totally. Now, when the mind is in the body totally, or together with the body totally, then you use the hands when they're needed. You use the legs, you use the eyes when they're needed. And you won't be wasting a lot of energy. You just hold the mind. You don't put it someplace, and you don't hold it in a particular attitude. You just hold it. Mencius, he was a Chinese Mandarin. He lived around 300 BC, and he was a follower of Confucius. And he said, you know, people are basically compassionate. And his advice was to get the runaway mind back to its original seat. Yeah? Love, he said, is the human heart. The heart is love. And justice is the human path. And he said, it is a pity that people leave the path and do not observe it. That people let go the mind and do not seek it. When they lose chickens or dogs, they know they must go and search for them. But when they let the mind go, they do not know that they must go and search for it. The way of learning is no more or less than searching for the heart and the mind of which you have let go. I think that's pretty good. The the mind that you have let go of, the runaway mind, the mind full of appearances, full of interpretations, is called the deluded mind. It's a mind full of things that appear. Now, deluded mind, the mind without any appearances. We sometimes call it the empty mind, the original mind. Yeah. What about that original mind? Long time ago in China, there was a teacher by the name of Tahuan. Didn't they name the pickles after him? Huh? No, in Shogenji, they got Tahuan. That's pickles, huh? You know, every monastery makes their own pickles. Long time ago in China, Tahuan lived, and he was in Zen. And he said there's a difference between the original mind and the delusive mind. The original mind, he said, is unconscious of itself. It doesn't have a self. Whereas the delusive mind is divided against itself. It interferes with the freedom of the original mind. In the Chinese, original mind is called Hanshin, and the delusive mind is called Nanshin. Shin meaning mind, And so we come here and we have Seshin. It means to unite the mind, pacify the mind, bring it together, realize the mind, Seshin. Original mind, an unconscious mind, or a mind unconscious of itself. There's no self in it, and that's why it's so difficult. We are really hooked on self. Now this Hanshin, this original mind, is not disturbed by effects. It is original. It's sitting right there, right now. It is original, and it is not full of appearances and effects. As it has no discrimination to make, no affective preferences to follow, it fills the whole body. It pervades every part and is nowhere standing still. It is never like a stone, and it is never like a piece of wood. If the mind has something in it, it stops. You know how you are, and everything stops. You can't hear, you can't see. Even when a sound enters the ears, it goes, or a light flashes before the eyes. To have something in the mind means that the mind is preoccupied and it has no time for anything else except that with which it is preoccupied. But to try to make this attempt to remove the thought, this appearance that is already in it, is just to refill it with something else. I must get rid of this thought, simply puts another one in its place, which is simply I must get rid of this thought. So he says, harbor nothing in the mind. And he goes on to talk about an old Chinese poem. It really was a love poem, but he uses it in a different way. He says that this thing is to think that I am not going to think of you anymore. Is still thinking of you. Let me then try not to think that I'm not going to think of you. This paradox that we're always stuck in. How can one keep the mind in a state of no thinking when its function is to think? How can the mind at one time be mind and no mind? How can A be simultaneously A and not A? We're right back to Aristotle, aren't we? Now, the appearances in the mind. I mean, every word I'm talking, it's coming out here that you're hearing, is an appearance in your mind. The appearances in the mind is not our reality, is not the reality of life. No. Out of the appearances in the mind, we interpret. We have an interpretation of life. Now stop and think a minute. I mean, you're going to think, you might as well use it to good advantage, huh? Are you an interpretation? You're not. You are not an interpretation, and yet that's how you keep using yourself. However you have interpreted yourself. And this is one of our problems. We have become identified with an interpretation. Like somebody said, we're like beggars who believe we have a kingdom. And we interpret our kingdom our way. And we're so worried about this kingdom. What's happening over here and what's happening over there. And I got to get this in order and I got to get that in order. See, how am I going to manage this? How am I going to govern this kingdom? All the while, it's not a real kingdom at all. Is it? It's a mishmash. It's a bunch of appearances that you keep trying to get into some kind of order, and they won't stay in order. Chuang Tzu, a long time ago, they called him the genius of the absurd. One summer day, he took a nap. And his disciples were watching him. He sat down under a tree. It was a nice warm day, and he fell asleep. But as they watched him, they could see that something was happening. And they began to talk amongst themselves and think, well, they looked at each other sort of with eyes, maybe he wasn't really asleep. Something was going on. So when he woke up, they inquired, they asked him what was going on. And he said to them, I have quite a puzzle. And I don't understand it. I dreamt I had become a butterfly. And of course the disciples laughed at him and said, who's disturbed by such a dream? When you wake up, the dream disappears. That's not the point, says Chuang Tzu. If Chuang Tzu can become a butterfly in a dream, it is possible that now the butterfly has gone to sleep and is dreaming that she is Chuang Tzu. What now is real? Chuang Tzu dreaming he had become a butterfly, or the butterfly dreaming that she is Chuang Tzu? And that is a very tremendous koan. That well you must know yourself. Know yourself, not interpret yourself. Now this term, no mind, what does it mean? Well, you've listened to me long enough, you should know. Sometimes, quite unknowingly, or unwittingly, we could say, you have it. Maybe you didn't recognize it. Everybody has experienced no mind. Yeah. Sometimes when you're just sitting and not doing anything, there's no thought in the mind. When there's no thought in your mind, where is your mind? Mind with thought in it has stopped. The thought it becomes fixated on the stop, Mind with no thought is ever flowing. So they call it no mind. It's not stopped any place. It flows. How do you recognize your mind without a thought? In one of Meister Eckhart's sermons, we read, and he talks, of course, about Jesus, who said, "I have not come into the world to bring peace, but the sword, so that I may cut off everything. If your eye sees everything, and your ears hear everything, and your heart remembers everything, then truly in all these things your soul is lost." At every form, at every appearance, the mind stops. And he goes on to say, to accomplish the inward act, a person must withdraw all of his soul's agents, as it were, into the corner of the soul, and conceal himself from all ideas and forms. Then he may do it. It must be done by means of forgetting and ignoring and letting go of the self-consciousness. It is in the stillness, it is in the silence that the word of God is heard. And then he continues again, there are those who object, saying our enlightenment depends upon ignorance. And surely that is wrong. God made man so that he could know. And as one of the prophets of old says, Lord, make them to know. Where there is ignorance, there is error and vanity. An ignorant person is brutal. He is an ass and a fool as long as he remains ignorant. That's true. But one must achieve unself-consciousness by means of transformed knowledge. Transformed knowledge is called also ignorance. This ignorance does not come from lack of knowledge, but rather it is from knowledge that one may achieve this ignorance. Then we shall be informed by the divine unconsciousness, and in that our ignorance will be ennobled and adorned with supra-knowledge. all the things that God would show us in the mysteries. It is by reason of this that we are made perfect, by what happens to us and not by what we do. Jesus told a story. Once upon a time, a very rich man needed some laborers in his garden. So he sent a man to the marketplace, and all the laborers who were available were called, and they got together, and they came out, and they began to work in the garden. And then others heard about it, and they came in the afternoon. And then others heard about it, and they came about when the sun was setting. And he employed them all. After it got dark, he gathered them all together, and he paid them all equally. Obviously, being human nature, those who had come in the morning were disappointed and said, "What injustice! What kind of injustice is this? We came in the morning, we worked the whole day, and all these fellows that came in the afternoon, and a few that have just come, they worked only for an hour. You paid them the same. This is injustice." So the rich man said to these objectors, "What I paid you, what I gave you, isn't it enough?" "Oh, it's more than enough. You paid us amply. But it is the injustice of it. Why are these people getting the same when they have just come?" And the rich man said simply, "I give out of my abundance. It is not your problem. You don't need to be worried about it. You say you've gotten more than you expected, so don't compare." Some people work very hard to achieve an enlightenment. They come in the morning. Some just come in the afternoon. Some come when the sun is setting. But you know, when they achieve, they all get the same enlightenment. And it may be that those who come in the morning object. "This is too much. This is injustice. I've been sitting all day, and now someone comes only in the evening, and they have experience." And the meditators are all so sad. It's like living a very virtuous life and then going to heaven and seeing all these sinners sitting with God. No. You know, Baal Shem was a rabbi, and he was visited by this woman. He knew her quite well. She came to synagogue all the time. And she was about 70, and her husband was about 80. And his whole life he'd been a sinner. And now he was becoming, at 80, a virtuous man. And so his wife had come to give thanks that her husband had finally been converted. She was a very pious lady. She had never wavered. She never went wrong. She was always on the right track, and always sure that heaven was just there waiting to welcome her. Always knowing full well that her husband was going to hell. Now, she said to the rabbi, "There is hope even my husband may reach heaven." And the rabbi laughed, and he says, "Sure, greater the sinner, greater the saint." And she looked at him, and she says, "Well, why didn't you tell me that before?" Saints will receive. They come in the morning. Sinners will receive. They may not come until evening, but everyone is going to receive because it is a gift. We, of course, all have our expectations. Expectations belong to the mind. They are also appearances. Disciplines belong to the mind. It's an appearance, necessary. So-called saintliness, so-called sin, it belongs to the thinking mind. When there is no mind, that is, when there is no self, there's no sinner and there's no saint. The gift is simply given. This mind, the thinking mind that's full of appearances, asks for certainty. We want to be damn sure before we take another step. Yeah? The mind asks for knowledge. Of course, when you stop asking for knowledge, you drop seeking for the truth. Because after all, truth is, after all, the goal, the final goal of knowledge. So we do make inquiry. We inquire, what is? What is? If all of this is an appearance, what is? It's all an appearance in my mind, my God. So what is? We inquire and we seek. When we sit for meditation, we don't inquire what is. We become silent. And we drop the appearances in the mind. And when we drop the appearances, that which is revealed. When this mind drops, you think you have to go someplace? There's no need to go anywhere. Everything is available. It has been available always, will always be available. The truth, it surrounds you. You exist in it, like a fish in the water. So that God is not a goal. He is what he is. It is what it is. Here now, right now. There's the trees and the wind blowing and the clouds scuttling across the sky, and you walk and you talk and you eat, you and I. This is what God is. It's not a goal. Knowledge is a goal. But God is. Now, when these appearances, a great many of them, of course, are desires. Or what we think further appearances are built upon or come out of what it is that we desire, whatever it may be. Now, supposing you work with yourself and a desire disappears. It is no more in you. What happened to the energy of the desire? Every desire, no matter how great or how small, takes energy to entertain. In every form, there is energy. So every desire has energy. You get rid of the desire, what happened to the energy? Nothing. It just simply remains. It can't disappear. Energy is indestructible. Energy cannot be destroyed. It changes form. In the Buddha, as a young man, there was a certain amount of energy, just as there is in all of us. Every one of us has the energy with which to love and be loved and to live and to listen and to whatever. And the energy in the man Buddha, it moved in sex, and it moved in anger, and it moved in greed, and it moved in 1,000 ways. But when he became enlightened, his perfect enlightenment, all these forms disappeared. What became of the energy? Isn't that an interesting question? When desires or thoughts, which are form, they are semi-material, they're a substance. When these forms are no more, when these forms are no longer, then the energy is simply formless. The little thing we sing all the time, energy, its form is formless and formless is form. It's just formless. When the forms, that is the thoughts, within the mind are not, then we say the mind is formless or no mind. I know, I think I'm confusing you when I think it's so simple. Isn't that simple? Yeah, that's simple. And this whole thing is just a nice little story. It's a very wonderful little story. Doko inquires, he wants to know the truth, but he doesn't understand the answers. And then this master also says, I don't understand myself. There were many scholars that came to the Buddha. Mahakashapa, he came. He was a great scholar. Sariputra came. He was a great scholar. He brought 500 monks with him. Sariputra came to the Buddha for more than knowledge. Of knowledge he'd had enough. He knew all the scriptures, all the Vedas. He could just stand there and spiel right along out of his mouth. But he asked the Buddha, give me something more than knowledge. And what do you think the Buddha said to Sariputra? Unlearn. Drop the mind, and to know what is form and what is formless. Okay? And now may the peace and the power that passeth all understanding hold us and keep us in the love of the Christed consciousness while we are seemingly separate one from another. And I thank you very much.
If you find Lola's talks valuable, more will be posted in weeks to come.